Hello everyone, we're ready to start our 3 o'clock session. The way this is going to work, we're going to have a presentation from Fred Beecher from the Nerdery from 3 until 3:30, and then at 3:30, Christopher Steffen from the Nerdery and Nick Rosenkrantz from the University of Minnesota will be talking about participant-led usability. So we will move on from there. So welcome, Fred.
Hello everyone, can you hear me all right? All right, fantastic. I'm going analog today. I have no slides. So what I want to talk to you about today, well, first let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Fred Beecher, as David said. I'm the Director of User Experience Design at the Nerdery. What I want to talk to you about today is a very simple idea. And I just want to share the idea and then actually have a pretty interactive session after I've talked about a few specific things. And it's a fairly simple idea. And that idea is founded on the last 5 years of my career, which have been really focused on bringing new people into the user experience design field. I have done a lot of actual training. I have done a lot of mentoring. I started the apprenticeship program at the Nerdery. And so my goal has been to get people into this field that is really hard to get into. And as a result of that, I've been thinking a lot about teaching user experience design and what some of the best ways are to do it. And I also get asked about once or twice a week, how do I get into UX design? And so I think about this question a lot. And as a result of doing a lot of this work, I think I actually have an answer, and I want to find out what you guys think about it. So the answer that I think I have is that if you want to learn or teach user experience design, you need to start with usability testing. And so I'm laying that one out there. Let that percolate for a little while. And I'll give you some of the background of how I came to this conclusion. So one of the things that I really enjoy doing is mentoring. And I participated last year in the local UXPA of Minnesota's mentorship program. Quick plug, I've participated in a lot of mentorship programs, and that one exceeded all of them by far. So if you're interested in being mentored or being a mentor, they're doing it again this year. So go up to their website and sign up either way. It's an excellent program. But I was mentoring a guy named Jake. And it was at the beginning of our relationship, and we were figuring out, okay, what sort of project are we going to do? Because I wanted to teach the whole process, so we need a project. And Jake came to me with this experience he had. He was trying to buy some tickets for his wife's favorite band, who was coming to the Minneapolis to play live. And he tried to buy tickets, but he couldn't. He had to select a section, and the sections were all these different codes, and he couldn't find where any of these sections were. It was very, very complicated, and it made it, I think it took him like a half an hour to actually buy these tickets. Now, this was his wife's favorite band, so that's the only reason he went for half an hour to do this. So I thought about this, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. There's a clear business reason to do this project because we can improve the conversion rate from coming to the site and then purchasing tickets. That's a clear business reason. And he's a young guy, so he has lots of friends that really enjoy seeing live music and are very likely to actually purchase tickets online. So, all right, we've got users, we've got a business problem, we can prototype stuff and test it with people, we can do usability testing. And that's where we started, is with a usability test of this particular system. And when I teach people usability testing, the first thing I do is I go to YouTube and bring up Steve Krug's example of a usability test that he has published. Now, what that does is he's actually showing you what a usability test sounds like. And as those of you who have done testing know, it's a very unique kind of human interaction. So I'm able to convey a lot of the basics of usability testing as Steve goes through this particular test. And so as that was happening, something started to percolate in my mind about the particular like what we were exactly learning and how it was really good that we were starting with usability testing. And then I went to, after that experience, I started to reflect a little bit on my own career to figure out, okay, why is it that I have had any success whatsoever? And I just was thinking about it. It was just in my brain for a little while, and then I came back to usability testing. Because my very, very first UX job was beginning the usability lab here at the University of Minnesota in the web development team. Now, that was in 1998. I will not take credit for the awesome work that Nick and David have done and the amazing lab that they have turned it into. My lab was super sketchy. The way it came about was I was in the STC program here, so coming to the St. Paul campus is like coming home for me. Yay, St. Paul campus. But I was taking part in a UI design class as a non-programmer, which was cool that I could even do that. And the professor said, hey, the web development team is going to create a usability lab. Anyone want to start it? I knew nothing about usability testing. I only recently learned that it existed. But I read a book, The Handbook of Usability Testing by Jeffrey Rubin, and I did what the book said. And I realized, in retrospect, now like 17 years later, everything that I learned from that experience. And the most important thing, I think, is that the foundation of my user experience design practice is in observing human behavior. And if you look at the curriculum of a lot of the UX design degree programs, because you can now get a degree in UX, and especially the interaction design programs, what you'll find is that there might be a research class. And as part of the research class, you do a little thing on usability testing. But the rest of the curriculum is all around how to code in jQuery, doing prototyping, mobile design patterns, innovation training, and all sorts of other stuff like that that isn't about people. And what's happening is that I think has the potential to be really detrimental to our field, because we have a bunch of people coming in here who are ostensibly designing user experiences, but their goal is to create the next pull to refresh or the next clear or whatever super cool, slick little interaction is the flavor of the day. Focus on the design and not on the people. And what I learned in the lab was to focus on people. It was my job to watch human behavior, specifically with technology, every day. And the reason that that's important is because fundamentally what we do as UX designers is we work with human behavior. It's the inspiration for what we do and the outcome of what we do. And the way that we choose, or the way that we are able to influence behavior is through technology. So I got to see people's behavior with technology. And specifically, I got to see them fail with technology. Now you can read all you want about things like banner blindness. I'm totally dating myself by even saying banner blindness. But once you see in a usability lab, after 3 days of testing, people never seeing the stuff in the right column, then that gets really ingrained into you, and you don't forget it. So that is, I think that's the first critical component of why you need to start with usability testing if you're at the beginning of your career or if you're considering teaching other people how to do what you do. The second thing is that my experience in the lab taught me in a safe or safer environment the fundamentals of user experience design research. So I feel like I am a reasonably competent user researcher. I can go into many different places, and I've been in many different places, from an operating room to a house where I'm pretty sure there's a meth lab in the basement, and get actionable insights from talking with people in context. Fieldwork is hard, and it relies on a set of skills that I think I initially learned in the usability lab. And a usability lab is a much safer environment than a house with a meth lab. I will say that. Because we have people coming in, And it's an environment that you as a tester are mostly-ish in control of. I don't know, Nick and David might argue with me on that one a little bit. What's that? Not a meth lab? Yeah, okay. Good to know. The usability lab here, not a meth lab. Check. But having people come in and do the same thing over and over again, and at least in a task-based usability test, Christopher and company will be talking about more open-ended testing next, which will be cool. But when you have people going through the same task over and over, what you have is, you know what to expect. So what that allowed me to do is to really get a sense of being able to build rapport with people. So I knew what to expect. I was comfortable. I was in my environment. And I was able to effectively build rapport with the people that were coming in to test. And while I was facilitating these tests, I was also learning a lot about asking questions, how to ask questions that people can actually answer, how to respond to the questions they ask me, which is to ask them the question back, and how to identify when to probe on a question and what a good probing question is. And these are all the things that I use when I'm doing a fieldwork engagement as well. And on top of that, how do you get people into a usability lab? You recruit them. And so I had to learn recruiting skills. And again, this was a fairly safe environment in which for me to do this. I didn't have to call a bunch of random people. I was fortunate enough to be able to stand outside student services and ask people if they wanted free bagels. So that was a real softball for me because college students will do pretty much anything for free food. So usability testing was an easy sell. But that really gave me the confidence that I needed later on in my career to do things like creating a screener that actually recruits for observable characteristics and actually cold calling people and going through them, through the screeners with them. This is something as a UX designer you should do once and then work with a recruiting agency, I'm just saying. Just to build that empathy for the people that are working for you. And then the final thing that I think I really learned as a result of starting with usability testing is the fundamentals of analysis. And again, this is another one of those sort of situations where it's a little bit of a softball, because my focus was task-based usability testing. So I saw this, a number of different people doing the same tasks over and over. So what that did is that made it fairly easy for me to identify patterns in their behavior. Now, when you're doing field work and it's more open-ended, it's a lot more difficult to identify those patterns unless you already have some amount of skill at it. And I found that I developed that skill in the lab. And to me, looking back on this, I am so grateful that this is how I started my career in user experience. Because for me, it's that it's the user that is the basis of everything that I do, and I think that focus has helped me have whatever success that I have had. So that's pretty much what I have to say, the idea that I have to promote to you, and the justification for that idea. So what I would love to do now is to make this a conversation to hear what your thoughts are on this idea. And I'm a UX designer, so I specifically want to know why this won't work. What are the problems with this idea? What things are not fleshed out that need to be fleshed out? I can't see very well from up here, so. Julie?
Test. So I'm actually not going to tell you a reason why this isn't going to work. Sorry, you can get that from somebody else. But I'm going to actually echo exactly what you just said, just to prove that you're not the only one who's thinking that.
Yay.
And that is the reason why I do user experience work. I've been in the user experience field for 13 years. And the reason why I am in this field right now is because I took a class here at the U of M. I was in the STC, Scientific and Technical Communication Program.
Go STC!
Go STC. And I thought I was going to school to be a technical writer. And then all of a sudden, this course came along called Usability Testing. I had no idea what it was, but it was in my major, and I had to fill some credits, and I thought it sounded interesting. And so I signed up, and I had Leanne as my instructor, and it blew my mind. Like, there are people who don't understand how to use this, and I could help them by creating something that is usable. And so now I am a user experience designer after 13 years of, but I would say one thing that you mentioned was, observing them. It allows you to, have that observation, but you also gain empathy, and that was really important for me because it allowed me to connect with whoever that user was. And I still, to this day, remember back to that feeling of I gained empathy for this person by observing them, trying to work with whatever system we were testing, and that was really important. And that's what I always have to bring back to my mind is, who are these users, and how can I empathize with their situation and make an end result that is going to be the best for them. So, anyway, not posing, why it's not going to work, but.
So instead of giving me a reason it won't work, you added to a reason why it will work. Yeah. I'm not sure you guys are doing this right.
You've got
but
one?
Thank you, Julie.
All right.
We had an experience where we did usability testing on a website, and we got a lot of responses that helped us, but we got a lot of responses that, I'm going to say it boldly, just proved that the users did not know what they wanted. In other words, they contradicted themselves quite often. And the level of user experience that they had, some of them wanted a very simple design, some of them wanted a very complicated design, some of them wanted colors just because they preferred certain things. So it was difficult for me to navigate those kinds of, how to evaluate what are the best responses, how do we make choices, and is there something to be said for ignoring some advice and training your users into a better way of doing things, even though it may not seem like that's what they wanted on first blush.
Yeah, I think that's something really important that you bring up. What I heard you saying was that people were saying all sorts of different things about what they wanted. And that's, I think, part of the value of usability testing is that we can ignore what they say they want and watch what they actually do. That's the thing that is, and that's one of these things that you learn now when you're learning about user experience design, is that people are really bad at predicting their future behavior. People will make up things to make you happy when you ask them what they want. But if you look at behavior, then you can see what they're actually doing, what's actually important to them, and then it's on the analyst's plate to be able to interpret that behavior. So this is one of those things where we're sort of seeing what we learn in school or in articles or whatever played out in real time.
So let me start this off by saying my mom used to call me Dear Abby when I was in high school. So empathy is not my problem. Well, it is, but to a different degree.
Empathy is all of our problems.
Yes, sometimes you need to put up barriers to empathy. So the one situation I can think of where you would not want to do usability testing is when a specific C-level or VP person says, do this thing, and you say, but can I? No. Then you have to figure out, is this a battle where I'm going to get in trouble for using time and money for doing the, no, do it, just do the thing. So when your CEO has a problem statement that might not even be asking the right question, and they are also grumpy cat, you should probably not do usability testing.
I absolutely love that situation because this allows me to do funny hand gestures in a public setting. This is something that poor Christopher and Casey have heard me talk about way too much, but this is what I call client jujitsu. Now, I work in like in an agency type setting, so I think in terms of client, but it can also be CEO. So we, as user experience designers, have ideas, capital I, about how things should be done in software development. Clients and CEOs have other capital I ideas, and what can happen is this, boom. If you can collide like that, and that's where conflict happens and bad things with projects happen. But if you use client jujitsu, trademark, what that is that's meeting people where they're at. And the CEO says, no, do this. You say, okay, we'll do it. And then usability test it, bam. And what that will do is that will show them what worked about their idea and what didn't work. And it's really difficult to argue with seeing people in real time or on a recording fail to understand whatever it was you were trying to convey. So, awesome. Thanks for that question. There's another one in the back.
So I think with the programs that are creating the interaction design, like the academic disciplines that are creating the interaction design and UX programs now are missing are things like cultural anthropology, sociology, the communication studies, and so I guess my question for you, and this is more a yes and, I agree with everything you said, but I'm thinking you're talking more about the on-the-job teaching somebody usability or mentoring as opposed to an academic program of study. Is that correct?
I will say that my bias is always towards a more practical or vocational style of education.
Yep.
But I believe that this applies to self-education. Like if when people ask me, what do I do to get into UX, one of the things I say now is learn about usability testing and start doing some. And also here's a link to Steve Krug doing some, so you kind of at least have half an idea of what you're doing. I believe that that can also work in a sort of hack school setting, where the first unit is, okay, let's just watch people use technology. And I think it could also work in an academic setting as well, where the focus of maybe the first semester or first year or whatever it might be of the program is observing people and making interpretations based on their behavior and not designing a thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And so I think my response is kind of a yes and. I agree with the approach that you set out, and especially in the hack school environment, I would say find some resources, like the Krug resource, but from cultural anthropology, from interviewing skills and so on, maybe their TED Talks or whatever, to give them some other places to go to round it out with more of the humanities and social science.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what I'm hearing you say is, do the usability testing, do the Krug, and do the Krug, that sounds like a thing now. Someone's going to have to come up with a dance called the Krug. That will be silly. But then me? Yes. Okay, I can that'll be on me. And then try and find those resources for additional type of behavior behavior observing methodologies to then sort of to reinforce what people might have gained through starting with usability testing.
I also agree with everything you're saying, so thank you. It's great to have that perspective. I think usability testing can go wrong when it's not clearly focused. So if people just go in and they're just observing, but they don't have clear objectives to start with, or a clear research question, or a clear sense of how they're going to measure the data, I think it's harder to, you would gather a lot of information and make a lot of observations, but perhaps that wouldn't lead to clear answers. So wondered if you could comment on that.
Lovely, you found something wrong with this idea. Thank you very much. If I think about it, I think maybe what I might do is to amend the idea to talk, if we're looking at people who are teaching themselves user experience design, encourage them to work with a mentor. And I feel like having a mentor would help people get a sense of when they are being successful with, for example, not asking leading questions, and when they're not being successful. Because if you've been involved in usability testing, you know it's a very real-time thing, and you can be saying one thing and thinking another and going, oh my gosh, I'm asking a leading question, what am I doing? And it just keeps coming out of your mouth. So a mentor can help point out to you when that is happening. If this is a more structured learning type of situation, that if you have like a buddy, so if you're in a class where you're learning about usability testing, for example, maybe you've got someone observing someone else, and that person is learning the same things and isn't in that sort of real-time state of flow, so they can sort of mark down things where you're asking a leading question or something like that. And specifically to your question about the focus of the testing, that might be something that is also up to a mentor or a class leader or something like that, by saying your goal with this is to X, or to maybe facilitate people through identifying what the goal might be.
Yeah, thanks for the this whole thought direction. I'm going to talk a little about why it could work, but why it also will be very difficult. Just
Excellent.
push in that direction. I want to rotate you maybe 90 degrees from where you're at. There you go. Perfect. What a UX guy. I think what you're talking about is, and maybe you've thought of it this way, but I just want to offer a different frame, is applying UX to UX. And I think UX could improve itself. It's a mathematical concept called recursion. I think it could improve itself if it applied itself to itself.
Yes.
And that's why it could be really effective, but it's also really difficult to do. It's really easy to do things sort of in a linear way and say, oh, they should do UX or they should respond to our methods. It's much more difficult to take the thing and apply it back to itself, but I think it'd be really effective if you kind of went that direction. And it seems like that's where you're moving.
So if I can restate what you're saying, and by the way, that is super tweetable, so awesome. It's sounding like what we should do in our UX practice is to have people observe us and provide that sort of real-time feedback. And yeah, I would, like I was saying about the, what a usability testing class activity might look like, I think that would be a fantastic idea, and I would love and also hate to have someone doing that for me as I'm in the middle of doing some sort of research.
And you have to listen to them the same way you expect others to listen to you.
Exactly.
And apply the same principles to yourself and you expect others to.
Exactly. Recursive UX. That sounds like a book.
All right, Fred, I've got one last reason why this isn't going to work.
Okay.
So I'm a designer. I have design work to do.
Yes.
I'm being asked to do, I'm already working 60 hours a week. I don't have time for this.
Are you a designer and you are trying to, you're already a UX designer. So you don't need to learn UX.
I don't have time to sit down with people and look at things. I need to be making.
Okay, so you need to be making all the time. How can you sneak in some observation? You're not going to like my answer because, well, no, I'm pretty sure you won't. Honestly, if that's how you're designing, you have two options. That sounds like a cultural issue. If you're in a company that is just cranking through design deliverables and not paying attention to users, you can either try and work the idea of user centricity into the culture of the company, which is not easy, capital N, capital E, or you can go find somewhere that's less bad.
All right.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I think we got, so.
And I'll
thanks,
stick
Fred.
around for a little while, so if you have additional questions. Thanks so much.
All right, so we're doing a quick transition. No break.
UX researchers don't need breaks.
That's right. What happened? We're an extended desktop.
Oh, I think it's just that. Yeah, it's a mute button. So it's on, but it's
Hold on.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks. And yeah, I would, like, it took me a little while. No, their awesome lab, that started from sketchy things.
Yes, I will bounce.
Cool. Okay. Do you want this?
I can use that. Let's see if
Oh, you want to use that?
I can use that.
Ah, very nice. So you know Nick already, I assume.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, wait, but Nick is not turned.
Hi, everybody.
Nick's microphone is not working.
Hi, everybody.
Last minute edit, that was almost very treacherous.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. My name's Christopher Steffen. I'm a senior UX designer at the Nerdery. I've been doing UX for roughly 18 years or so. So this isn't my first rodeo by any means, but what I want to talk to you about today is innovation inside usability, a pivot in the way we actually conduct user engagements to kind of extend the bounds of what can be achieved by this methodology. And that is currently being called by myself and my good comrades at the university, participant-led usability. So what does it mean then? And I got to stay close to this thing. I'm sorry, it's going to be kind of weird. Maybe I do, I'm not sure. I tend to move around. It can be distracting. I apologize in advance.
Tell me what you're expecting this to do.
I'm not going there now. So what does it mean to be participant-led? So put very simply, the idea of a participant-led process, it's dark here. Actually, I like that. I'll stay here. The idea of a participant-led process is really taking the strictures of usability and taking it away from the canned rat maze, I've decided what your task is, now go do it approach to usability, and instead using the experience of your users, your participants, to help form the task structure that you will test in. What that means is that when I have someone sit down in the chair, instead of saying, okay, step one, try doing this thing, what I'm going to say is, so you do online banking, right? We're here to test an online banking thing maybe. What do you do when you online bank? And capture 1, 2, 5 different tasks that they find critical to their online banking behavior, and then turn them loose in the environment. Yep. Turn them loose in the environment, find out, can they actually complete the tasks that they gave me, and let them tell me what success was or what failure was. Following up on that, we get 3 main benefits. And I may be getting ahead of myself.
You're getting ahead of yourself. I want to take a step back for just a second and talk
good.
about how I discovered this. It was thanks to a couple amazing clients that got me to think differently, and also due to some work I've been doing on my leadership skills. One of the things that we've been talking about lately is it's not about you. And this quotation has stuck with me. You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. When we're doing the work of usability, user research, one of the things we're trying to talk to our clients all the time about is not about you. We can take the same approach, this open approach, with the way that we build that study, that evaluation, so that we're understanding the motivations and the expectations of the users themselves. Thank you. Thank you. I'm still getting better. Is this better? Okay. I read to you this quotation. I will trust that you've got it. And with that, I will move us along.
All right, so why a change in methodology in the first place? There's nothing seriously wrong with usability. I mean, Fred's up here wanting to start our careers on it. One would hope that it's not fundamentally flawed. Well, no, it's not. The reason for the change in methodology is based on a number of different pressures, and I think a lot of them have to do with how usability is currently being perceived. It's about expectation, conflict, bias, and artificiality. We have heuristic experts out there in the market now who say, I'm not going to do usability testing because in order to find the usability flaws in this software, I just need a heuristic analyst strong enough to spot the usability flaws because they've done this a million times. They've seen all the pitfalls. They know where that blind spot is on the right side of the screen, etc. So I don't need users. I just need a really good heuristic analyst. A thing I got back on LinkedIn discussing this was, if I could just get Don Norman in here, I'd be fine.
Wouldn't we all?
Yeah, well, wouldn't we? But we can't all have Don Norman, and even if we could have Don Norman is not your user. So there is that. Then there are other problems, such as bias within usability testing, especially the confirmation bias. If you don't know what you're doing when you're setting up your study, it's really easy for you to set up a test that just confirms your hypotheses. You've got to make sure that you're writing something that then that is capable of user-independent falsifiability. Tell me how great this screen is.
Is it the best website you've used today or
Yeah.
the best website you've used all year?
Yes, exactly. Then also the underlying problem that people were talking about when they talked about using a heuristic analyst instead is artificiality. The idea that when I'm conducting a user session, what I'm doing isn't real. I've brought you into a lab. I'm making you use a computer that's not yours. I'm making you do tasks that you're not interested in and kind of go down a flow that you never would have initiated on your own. There's so much wrong with this picture that, well, yeah, the feedback I get may be neutral at best. I may get some mechanical data, but that may be all I get. So
Parts of it may be real, but parts of it are going to be downright antiseptic from what's really experienced out there.
That's true. So the other half of the problems then hinge on how we conduct, synthesize, and present our efforts. And the secret sauce here is the problem, or the way we solve for the first half over here, the problems with bias and everything else, is really how we then close the loop on the second side. How are we conducting this? How are we synthesizing this? How are we setting up our studies in the first place? I think I'm ready to move on here. And that's about really embracing the nature of the method. And I may get pushback on this from this room. I've certainly had it on the wide web, etc. What is the point of usability and user testing? The point of usability and user testing is to validate whether or not that thing that you built or are planning to build or in the process of building will actually solve the problem you expected it to solve. Beyond that, I don't think there's a lot of room for sort of controversy. So if you can get that information with authentic user data versus propped up user data where you've kind of made it impossible for them to do anything other than what you've decided is their narrow golden ribbon of task path, then your idea of what is real success can be colored significantly. And what do you want to learn when you conduct it? The idea of that goal set. When I'm testing, what am I testing for? Am I looking for a particular type of success or failure? Am I looking for comprehension? Am I looking for basically value extracted from the system that will help me understand why they'd use our website instead of somebody else's?
Yeah, I want to take a step back from that. When I'm talking with clients about getting ready for their evaluation, I often introduce them into building scenarios. I say, you're going to build some scenarios that your users are going to do as you observe them. And when you're writing them, think about your goals. What is the goal condition that success looks like? Mm-hmm. Don't write in terms of do this thing, then do this thing. Think about the goal that they're searching for and then step back. Watch how they would approach your product to get that goal done. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you're suggesting we're assuming too much by giving them a goal.
Yes, we've decided what the goal is before we've even started asking questions, which is kind of cute, really. Now, mind you, in a broader, more holistic UX process, you've already had a step where you've done your discovery with users and you've tried to extract these goals ahead of time, but then you started building. And you may realize at that point that unless your inquiry at that point of discovery was really contextual, that maybe it was kind of in a vacuum of its own. And some of the questions you got might have been more theoretical than practical. This is where you can then bring it back to a practical frame.
Hashtag usability vacuum.
There you go. And then finally, how are you going to use the data that you get? So I've conducted a study. I'm going to synthesize my study, find all the trends, find out that this was great for people, people wanted to do this, that. So when I design my study, I need to know what I need to come away with and how I want to use that information. Am I looking to improve an existing system? Am I building a new system? Am I trying to prove value? Am I trying to move some sort of needle?
Or just get one step closer to launch.
Well, yeah, exactly. Whee. So how this then differs from present methods?
Touched on this a little bit.
Just a little bit. So gaining value is really a function of embracing the user's approach. When you set up a usability script, who then defines the task? Traditionally, it's always been us or the stakeholders. It depends on who you're working with.
Of course.
So, I mean, it's really lovely when someone says, oh no, this is the task. It's like, well, yeah, that's a little rigid. No, this is the task.
Well, sometimes it's obvious. Let's say that we're testing a housing application tool.
How about login? Yeah, exactly. So some of these things don't have a lot of plasticity, but when we set up a usability script, we are always putting ourselves, traditionally, when we're doing usability, as the authors of task. And while I'm not saying that we don't still have to pay attention to this, it's much better if when we're in a broad landscape, when we're testing at a complex system, that it's better to get the task from the user than to define it ourselves. And then, do we expect all users to have the same needs and mental models? Well,
Sometimes I find out that this answer is made obvious when I ask right at the start of a test, who is the user of this tool? Far too many clients say, oh, everybody. Everybody is a user.
Do they have money?
If the follow-up question is, do we expect all users to have the same needs and mental models? There should be a match or a mismatch there. That's going to tell us a lot about who the user really is.
Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing, is we are actually, with this method, the differentiator is we're sensing for these differentials in needs and mental models. We want to find a way to actively capture the differences as opposed to just kind of shoehorning everyone down the same pipe. And then, so why do we set up the rat's maze and then judge success based on how they're able to navigate the finite single path, as opposed to teaching us a little bit about a real world use case that may be wholly new to us, that maybe we completely missed in discovery, or that maybe has brand new color. Because it turns out when they said this thing in discovery, they didn't really mean what it sounded like. They didn't really want to give all of their money to some Saudi prince. What they really wanted to do was something slightly different, and now we're seeing it in action. So this makes a lot more sense now. That was confusing when we saw that in discovery. So the thing that really makes this difference is finding ways to listen to users and really map their paths and understand their goals as the rubric, as the framework for judging what happens in the environment. When you observe their behavior and you hear their feedback, it's now interpreted against their own frame, which means that you're also making them more included in the test. Part of the other problem with artificiality is I've asked you to come in here and I'm telling you what to do. It's not your computer. It's not how you would do it. Well, now I've asked you what we should be doing. This is your task. You own it. I no longer have to lean so hard against, it's okay to tell us something's wrong with the system. We want to hear what's wrong with the system. You are defining what's right and wrong with the system. This is your task. You can't be wrong. It's your task. Only the system can fail you in the task that you have set up. We have made this so much easier to mitigate without ever having to maybe get into that lie space. We didn't design this, so be critical as you like. We don't even have to go there.
Absolutely. When I think about our traditional scenarios, the way I often introduce them to a participant is I say, here's a scenario, I put it on this piece of paper, I'd like you to pretend you are in this situation. What you're suggesting is to stop pretending.
Exactly. Let's get something real. And while we're at it, let's find out whether or not what we thought the task was the actual task. So the other thing is prepare flexible sessions and capture methods. So there's a little more additional work in setup, which means I don't write just a script. I do write my script, but I write my script in such a way that I'm going to use it like a checklist. When I hear the tasks that my users give me, I will put a tick mark every time they engage one of the steps in my script. And what that will tell me is how real my script is. If everyone follows my script letter for letter, and I can actually say, okay, for this participant they did 1 and then 3 and then 2 and then 4 and then 5 and then 6. Or maybe they did 1 and then 5 and then 6. Okay, I may have learned something about some unnecessary fluff in my system if 1, 5, and 6 are all that really mattered. There's some additional work in capture. That's part of understanding that when you're actually pulling this stuff in, that you set up a spreadsheet maybe. I mean, a lot of people have done usability captures in different ways. Maybe it's an inline document, you've got your question string, you're writing frantically or typing frantically into little spaces that you've left on your piece of paper or in your Google Doc, or you're filling in your cells in your spreadsheet because they're talking and they're moving fast. You're trying to get them to slow down, and maybe you're just the observer and the moderator's just going too darn quick. But now you actually have to pay attention to what they said, whether it was on your list or not, capture it anyway, and then being able to map it back to whether it was a task match, a mental model match, or not.
Without obvious prompts, it's harder to tell when task 1 ended and task 2 begins in the mind of a participant.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes there is no break at all. And then the additional work is really based on approach of work, not volume of work. So what I'm actually asking you to do is to approach the work differently in this method, not to make more work for yourself. So yes, you need to write your script. You have to write more script? No, you just write it a little differently. You still have to capture. Do you have to capture more? Well, on volume, probably not. You just have to capture it a little bit differently. So it really costs you nothing additional, except maybe focus and attention to detail. And then preparing a flexible capture then not only allows for you to listen better, it focuses your learning and your recommendations a little bit better.
One of the hardest things I've seen teams try to capture and try to learn from is to speak the language of the user. Doing this, I think, could make it easier to stop speaking our language, let go of our jargon, and to start speaking in terms of the words that the participants are giving us.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. Synthesis by user criteria instead of system criteria. So this is where synthesis then takes its right turn. So instead of going through all of the feedback that I've received and trying to make sense of it based on, okay, task 1 was always task 1. When people got to task 1, what happened? That's not important anymore, except whether or not they ever engaged with task 1 in the first place, and if they did engage with task 1, how did that go? It's more important to make sense of your feedback based on the tasks that the participants have defined themselves. So when everyone ran through their task list, how many of them shared a common structure? What were the common parts of their structures? What were the things that were on your list that never got engaged at all? What things were engaged every time? That's where you're finding out where task match is real, where you've actually supported real user needs versus built a system based on stakeholder needs or technological capability. These things happen a lot, and depending on the UX project you're involved in, maybe your discovery was super thin, and this was the only chance you were going to get into the minds of your users. I mean, I'd like to tell you that every UX project gives you all sorts of opportunities to engage with your user base, but in the commercial sector where I happen to live at the moment, that's not always true.
In our previous presentation, Vrajita talked about a consideration of who's at the table and who's not at the table. User criteria can be wildly different if we assume too much about what their criteria is going to be. This approach allows those unspoken criteria to find their voice.
That's absolutely true. So the other part of that is then also not only giving them a way to set the rubric in the first place, but let them decide for you, tell you explicitly, are you done? Did that go well? Is this what you expected? I mean, not say, that was great, wasn't it? Okay, all right, though this is the point where Nick would punch me in the side of the head and tell me not to do that anymore. But the idea is that they get to tell you whether they succeeded or failed. The system definition that you wrote out on your script ahead of time might have said, success is they got from this screen to that screen. They understood what this label meant. They get to tell you what success or failure was because that may allow you to fine-tune or nuance or language tweak what you're doing because maybe they succeeded mechanically but felt like they failed. Or they felt like they succeeded, they thought they got everything they wanted, but in the system definition, they didn't get the work done that the system wanted them to do. This stuff happens all the time.
Or conversely, let's suppose that we observed that they would never have submitted that housing application, but they had a wild time doing it, and they thought it's submitted, no problem. I'm going to go do something else now, okay? That's bad.
That's bad. And then, of course, you have to report back what you've learned in terms of user success, system success, and then model match. So now you're not getting one stream of data back. How does the task flow work? But how did tasks work? Were tasks relevant? Is the system built in a way that matches the mental models of the users it's meant to serve? So the value of the change in approach and results. By now it's probably glaringly obvious, but I've got some pictures for you. So observing mental models in action, not rats in mazes.
Can I give a realistic
Absolutely.
example? I'd like to give a shout out to the College of Education and Human Development for teaching me how to do this. Amanda Costello's in the back, and Amanda did something I had never seen done before. A client who I gave them a template like scenario 1, scenario 2, fill in all of the blanks, added a page called scenario 0. I was like, what is this? And I read it, and the scenario there was simply a prompt that I would ask the user. It was to get a piece of paper handy and then ask the participant, why don't you tell me out loud what you would be looking for to determine whether any college is a good fit for you or not? And then I was supposed to just sit there and write down whatever the participant told me. And it could have been, oh, I need famous professors. Or maybe it was, I need to be sure I can afford it because I hear college is different from one place to another in cost. Whatever it is they told me.
I want to be in Gryffindor.
My job was then, after that, I took that piece of paper and I put empty checkboxes next to each one they told me, turned it around 180 degrees and said, great, put this college to the test. This particular college knows it might not be a good fit, might be a good fit. They don't care about that right now. They want to make sure that you can tell as swiftly as possible whether it's a good fit or not.
So validate your task and your functional hypotheses. It's cute pictures, isn't it? So what I've got going on here is just a working model of how a crow uses a tool versus observing that crow using the tool. How I think this can work out versus what I watch work out, right? So this is about getting into that space and being able to bring your hypotheses made flesh. And what I mean by that is every prototype we make, every idea we put in front of a user, it's a hypothesis. Recognize it for what it is. It's not sacred. It can't be sacred. It has to be disprovable. That has to be encapsulated in your approach. You need to be able to see whether what you thought was going to happen actually happens. That part of usability doesn't go away. We're just redefining what that thing that needs to happen is. And then inform your improvements in pivots instead of just doing bug fixing. So you can spot a problem with a UI. Oh, if we just moved that button, we'd solve everything. But that's a very small scope success. It'd be much better if we'd be able to find out, well, you know, we were planning to launch this piece of software. The software works exactly as we planned it to work, but it turns out that it doesn't actually do what the users want to do. Or if it did something slightly different, they would love it 10 times more. They would give us their life savings and they would name their children after us. So, I mean, we miss this sort of feedback because we're too busy chasing bugs.
Yeah, usability evaluations are not quality assurance. They're both very important, and I love telling QA jokes, but they're not the same.
So just a brief primer on kind of what you need to get started if you want to start doing participant-led usability tomorrow. And you can probably tell it's not that steep a list. You're not excused in any way, shape, or form of the basics. You still need to know what your goals are and what hypotheses you're testing. You still need to know what the questions you're trying to answer are and for whom you're trying to answer them. You still need a script. You just tuck it into your back pocket instead of leading with it. Freedom of movement needs a landscape to move in. When you're doing participant-led usability and you want to turn the participants loose in the broad sweeping planes of your app, your website, your managed SaaS tool, or whatever it is the thing that you've built is, there has to be enough of it for them to roam freely in. So there is a gradient of requirement, meaning that the more robust your prototype is, the more robust your system is, the better results you're probably going to get because there'll be less intervention to kind of say, okay, well, that part of the thing doesn't work. We're going to get in and we move the screens.
We're going to have a fight up here at this point because I posit that an open-ended usability evaluation can be especially valuable at the prototype phase. What I do is I will give my participants what I call a magic mouse. Oh, they clicked on a link that doesn't exist yet. No problem. I just say, great. Let's take one of these empty note cards I have handy. Why don't you show me what you're expecting that to do?
All right.
And then it just becomes an exploration.
Protocol updated.
It totally works. I've seen it happen.
That's nice. I like that. All right, forget that bit. However, I do think that, I mean, I've often said before that when we engage usability and sort of any sort of evaluative measure to try and decide, is what we're doing right? Are we targeted in the right direction? Are we delivering real value? Are we serving our users? That I want to do that multiple times throughout a project if I can manage it. I want to do it early, I want to do it in the middle while we're building so we can course correct, and I want to do it near the end before things get really expensive. And then maybe I want to do it when we're in beta so we can then fine tune for phase 2 or next release or whatever that is. So I want to be testing all the time.
Always be testing.
So I kind of, maybe lazily, because I didn't have a magic mouse, think that I would necessarily be able to do this at the concept stage. Maybe I was wrong.
It's okay. I'm wrong sometimes too.
Okay, fair enough. And then finally, it's about trusting your users to bring their truth to your work. This isn't about deciding what the reality of anything that you're building is, because, I mean, often the hippo in the room, that highest paid person, et cetera, you know, is the person who says, this is what this is for, this is what this is going to do, this is how this serves an organizational goal. And sometimes that organizational goal isn't as useful as maybe it really is. Maybe it's a vanity goal. Maybe it's something that we're doing an app because everybody's got an app. I mean, how many times has anyone heard that? But this is about really bringing some reality, getting that user touch back into the system in a way that's really demonstrable. This is the sort of thing where Fred can do his client foo. You've got your script, but you want their script. You want to know what they need, not what you propose to give them. I mean, it's the difference between sales and marketing in the classical sense. Sales is, I've got stuff on the shelf, please buy it. Marketing is, I need to figure out what you need so I can make it and sell it to you. This is really about figuring out what you need to make. And then finally, if you do hit a wall in the middle of your exercise, you've got the script in your back pocket still. So they gave you one task instead of 5. Well, okay, let's get through that task. And then if you have to answer questions about the other parts of the system that you have prototyped, that you have built, that are new, that are different, you can still say, all right, we've been through this, but I want to show you a couple more screens. And can you tell me what you think of this? What's going on this screen? And then we're back into normal usability task-based mode. And then finally, you can still cover all of your bases, but then you also learn whether your bases were the same as their bases and why. So, I mean, it's really a chance to dip double or triple into your user pool for the same 60 to 90 minutes. And then I think
about a minute left.
Oh God. Analyzing results based on tasking, I'll talk really fast. No. So when it comes time to figure it all out, I mean, I've covered synthesis a little bit already. It's really about understanding and mapping tasks as opposed to just mechanical failures. It's not going to be as easy to convert into numbers, but the learning will be far more robust. It'll be far more real. It'll be far more representative of the users you're attempting to serve. It's going to be a closer practice to analyzing user research, the field work that Fred was talking about before, and it's going to require that deeper skill set for analysis because it's not as easy as just saying, made it past login. It's going to be, okay, well, when they logged in, they tried to use Facebook. That was different. Should we consider that? And then still know where users succeed and fail, but then you add the lenses of participant-designed success and failure and participant-designed or defined task relevance. Not just, did they succeed? Did they think they succeed? Did they think they needed to do that in the first place?
Great.
Are we still under that last minute? So why are we doing this again?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Anyway, so I mean, I think you get the general idea where we're basically looking for ways to remove artificiality, to bring usability tasks forward into this kind of space of contextual inquiry without necessarily doing field work. But we're erasing that line between I'm in a lab and I'm doing an exercise and I'm in your living room asking you questions about your needs in your life. It's a half step between in some ways. I don't know how much time we have for questions, do we? We don't.
I'll be sticking around after if you want to talk with me about how to adapt an existing approach, because I think there's a lot of promise behind this open-ended conversation we want to have with our end users so we can serve their long-term interests.
And I'm going to stick around so I can steal his magic mouse.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, thanks to Christopher Steffen and Nick Rosenkrantz. So that's it. Year 10 of World Usability Day is in the books. Thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next year.